The Road of Nightmares is the latest raid to be released alongside the Lightfall expansion. With the Day 1 event changing over to a 48-hour contest mode, the expectations were set to have this raid likely mimic the potential difficulty of Vowed Disciple, or at least be as buggy as Vow's Day 1. However, with Day 1 completed, it honestly leaves a lot to be desired. First off, I want to start off with the visuals of the raid. It is just visually beautiful. I've not been captivated by the scenery and evolution of the backdrop of a raid since Garden of Salvation, which I saw as one of the most aesthetically pleasing raids to look at. The combination of the dark structures from the pyramid and the roots of the Tree of Silver Wings created by the Traveler's terraforming being is well crafted, and seeing each structure interact with each other makes this raid on par with Garden of Salvation in terms of visuals, causing me to almost pause to just take in the sights during the 3 runs that I've done during that contest time. I just want to say props to the team who designed the visuals for this raid, the details, the aesthetic, as well as all the visual effects that have gone into this raid, because they've just outdone themselves on this compared to the previous ones. Second thing was, I wanted to go over the mechanics of the raid. All in all, they were fairly simple, with the majority of the encounters essentially playing connect the dots as fast as you can, especially within the second encounter. Although, with this second encounter, they did add in the flavor of essentially jumping between 2 different sides of a massive canyon by the use of actual man cannons, which is really fun. Now, beyond that, if I wanted to select on a specific encounter within it, it would have to be the 3rd encounter as the best encounter in terms of just the mechanics, because compared to the 1st, 2nd, and 4th, this is completely unique when it came to everything, especially as well the design, because instead of actually connecting the nodes like in the other ones, you are essentially aligning and changing planets with another side of the team, and the damage phases within there is actually really kind of cool, because it harkens back to the original Caretaker, where it's you have to select on 3 plates. In this case, you had to go on a specific combination or the order of plates based off the planets that show up and the shield that it shows. Now, as much as I enjoyed the mechanics, there's still some parts of it where I have a huge issue with, and that's primarily with the man cannons themselves. I didn't want to have to worry about this, but apparently, if you run anything higher than 30 FPS, you have a chance of going beyond the actual intended location. Either you'll be flung off to the side, up above, down below, and even if you turn it down to 60 FPS, you're still receiving that issue, and it's kind of annoying, especially when, as someone who's playing on PC, if I have a significantly high frame rate, I'm essentially just kind of shooting myself in the foot for this, and I feel like that's just really not what I would want to do. And then when it comes down to that, there shouldn't be a reason for me to turn down my game just so I can consistently do an encounter, especially when the actual use for it, like the man cannons in the second encounter, are pivotal in actually doing the entire encounter. So hopefully Bungie is able to fix that or patch something, within the next couple of weeks of it, because ultimately it's a really negative impact when it looks like that, people who are running huge, massive gaming rigs essentially have to match the FPS of if they're playing on the old Xbox One just to do an encounter. And I find that just a bit of an insult and a bit of a letdown when it comes to everything else working pretty much almost as intended. The final point that I really wanted to talk about is the boss encounters, and honestly, particularly the final one with Nezarec. Honestly, to just sum it all up in one single word, it would be disappointing. Nezarec's final encounter is essentially a joke, especially when you compare it after the Planetarium. We assumed that it would be this difficult, long, arduous, complicated system, where it actually would be a very interesting situation where we have to move different items, do different things. But ultimately, what we got was, again, just connect the dots, but then we have one additional point of it that is just, hey, work on getting the refuge to prevent the white mechanic. Which is not something that I was kind of hoping for, especially when it came down to that. It felt kind of like a letdown because, we essentially had the first boss, which was, in the planetarium. You're doing all these different changes, you're doing all these dynamic switches, and then also the damage itself. I just want to compare the two. Within the day one run that we did, my team and I, we essentially had to get him to almost to the enrage point for the planetarium. For Nezrak, we did him in two phases. Two damage phases. And the main thing is that the damage phases that you get for Nezrak are so long that it's just a joke at this point. There's been even, I'm not sure if this has been done so yet, but during contests, apparently you have also been able to get it to do as a one phase. And, that takes a lot of time to get to that point. And also not the fact of having a discount of, I would say maybe 20 power level removed. So the fact that you're able to essentially get a 2-phase and possibly even a 1-phase during contest already kind of says a lot, especially when in the planetarium, during contest, you went 3 full phases. At least that's what we did within our team, to actually be able to get that done. And I just don't like the fact that essentially we were able to finish one of them within 2 phases, which is the final boss, which still I will never get over. Meanwhile, his underling, which is, supposed to be this minor character, we had to do 3 damage phases. Now granted, the damage phases were a bit shorter than Nezrak, but still the fact remains is that Nezrak should have felt more tanky, which he didn't. And I think that was a main issue when it came to that. Because personally, if I really was going to be honest with it, I would have actually had the final encounter be based within the planetarium rather than what we have right now. Because when it comes down to it, the final encounter is more complex, it is more engaging, it's more participation among everyone else, because honestly, you can technically just 3-man, and it's already been done actually at this point, you can 3-man Nezrak on contest, which is not difficult when it comes down to it. And I think that's just kind of something where, it felt like a letdown because we were essentially got up to this entirely complicated encounter, and then all of a sudden it dropped back down to where we were back in the second and first. Now, overall, as much as I really enjoyed contest mode, don't get me wrong, this is not really seen as a bad raid. It honestly didn't feel like what a day one was supposed to feel like. Majority of the wipes weren't even to us not being able to kill the enemies effectively. It really didn't feel like there was any aggression from the ads within it. Maybe in the planetarium, but that's because everyone was just so close together compared to everywhere else. But also, the mechanics were just so simple to the point where we literally were just screwing ourselves over because we were overcomplicating things. It shouldn't be, we are overcomplicating the situation. It should be, these mechanics are really complicated, we will need to try a different strat. That's where the issue comes into play. Now, not only that, the race for World's First for the Root of Nightmares took less than 3 hours. Literally it almost take, I think 2.5 hours, give or take a minute or so? The last time it took that little of time was the race for World's First for Scourge of the Past. And at that time, there was no contest ever enacted on that. That was the last raid without contest. And so when it come down to it, it's just ridiculous. Now, people have already done this flawless, which again, you do have 48 hours, so I'm not going to fault people. I'm not going to fault the raid on that. But it's still just the fact of you're able to do this flawless fairly well. Low manning it on Nezrak is kind of the big issue in that case. And the main reason why is that you weren't able to really easily low man, Rulk during Vow of the Disciple during contest. There was very few times where that's ever became something that was low manable. The only one that I could really think of that was low manned during contest was Galrun in Crown of Sorrows. and that was it. Everything else, it did take a little bit of time, even after a contest, for it to be low manned. And I think that's kind of the issue where it comes down to it. Now, when it comes down to the situation, overall, I think this isn't a bad raid, but for a veteran player like me, I think that it should have been a little bit more difficult. Now, with that being said, I think in the positive note, this is a great thing to show to any new lights or anyone who's new to day one raiding, to kind of get an understanding of how everything works, how the damage is different from when you're in contest versus regular, and kind of going through the process for it. Like, personally for me, hopefully for next time, what they do is that they do have a more difficult day one, maybe have more aggression from the ads, maybe a little bit more complicated mechanics, but I still do not mind the full 48-hour contest time frame, because again, I would want to have newer players still have the access to go through the raids contest mode, because again, personally for me, I think it's a really good thing that they did expand it, even though it really didn't need to take that long to get through our first contest completion. So that's kind of what I think of our day one, or at least the contest version of Root of Nightmares. It's a fun raid, but honestly, it really didn't feel like an actual contest at that point, just because it was just so easy. But again, if you had a different experience, or you had a different opinion about it, do put it down in the comments down below. I'm down to hear your feedback on it. Again, you're going to be seeing a lot more stuff from this place, likely not only just for like Destiny 2 content, there's also going to be other things that are going to come up here. I am working on a Lightfall review for not only just like with the raid being included, but also other stuff like Neomuna, the entire campaign, all the weapons, and all that stuff that has been brought into it, because ultimately it all does kind of matter, and honestly, it's going to take a little bit of time, but hey, it's going to be coming out as soon as I'm able to get that finished. Hopefully it'll be soon, but again, it should be within the next month or so, likely a little bit less time. But in the meantime, there's going to be other stuff that'll be coming out. It's just, kind of like reviews like this, personal bias type deal, and other edited forms of content. But until then, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. If you do liked it, hit the like button, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.